Okay, stop what you're doing because this story is wild, and it literally just happened less than 24 hours ago. A Canadian nurse, a woman who had a perfectly good career, a perfectly normal life in Ontario, Canada, quit her job, flew across the Atlantic, and boarded a civilian ship headed toward Gaza. And on the morning of April 30th, 2026, Israeli naval forces surrounded that boat in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea, more than 500 nautical miles from Israel, boarded it at gunpoint, and detained her along with over 180 other activists from 44 countries. Now the internet is exploding. Her pre-recorded video went viral in hours. The debate is out of control. And everyone, the left, the right, international lawyers, world governments, is screaming at each other about who was right and who was wrong. But here's the problem. Almost no one is telling you the full story. That's what we're doing today. We're going to break this down completely. The facts, the context, the legal questions, what actually happened on that boat, and the bigger picture that this story is pointing to that almost no one is talking about. So first, who is this woman? Her name is Marie Tota. She is a registered nurse from Ontario, Canada. By all accounts, she had a stable healthcare career. And sometime in the past year, she made the decision to join the Global Samud Flotilla, an international civilian-led mission that launched from Barcelona, Spain on April 12, 2026, with the stated goal of breaking Israel's naval blockade of Gaza and delivering humanitarian aid. She wrote about her motivations on Substack before she left. She talked about growing up in a devout Catholic family, and while she doesn't identify as religious anymore, the idea of love thy neighbor never left her. She said when she first saw news about the bombing of the Al-Shifa hospital in Gaza back in April 2024, something shifted in her. Now look, I'm not here to mock her motivations. A person wanting to help people in a war zone is not something I'm going to ridicule. That impulse is human. But here's where it gets complicated. Before she left, she recorded a video, a pre-planned, pre-recorded video. That video was designed to be released if she was detained. And in that video, she said, "If you're watching this, Israeli occupation forces have kidnapped me from international waters." She called it a kidnapping. She called it part of a genocide. She held up her Canadian passport on camera. Now, was it a kidnapping? Was it illegal interception? Was it something in between? That is exactly what we need to unpack, because this is where the facts actually get really interesting. Here's the factual timeline. On April 12, 2026, a fleet of ships departed Barcelona, Spain, as part of the Global Samud Flotilla. This was described as one of the largest civilian humanitarian missions of this kind in history. Over 50 vessels, 400-plus activists from 44 countries. Their stated mission? Deliver humanitarian aid to Gaza and challenge Israel's naval blockade, which has been in place since 2007. On the night of April 29th into the early hours of April 30th, Israeli naval forces intercepted the flotilla. And here is the number that you need to pay attention to. They were more than 500 nautical miles from Israel and Gaza. To give you perspective, the usual interception zone has historically been 50 to 100 nautical miles from Gaza. This time, 500 miles, near the Greek island of Crete. That is an extraordinary reach. According to the Global Samud Flotilla, Israeli soldiers boarded vessels from military speedboats, pointed lasers and semi-automatic weapons at passengers, ordered activists to the front of the boats, hands and knees on the deck, jammed communications equipment, disabled engines on several ships, left some boats adrift and powerless at sea. The Israeli Foreign Ministry confirmed the interception and said, and I'm paraphrasing here, that it was a peaceful operation with no casualties and that all detainees would be transported to Greece. Foreign Minister Gideon Saar wrote on social media, Israel will not allow the breach of the lawful naval blockade on Gaza. They also released a statement calling the flotilla a PR stunt. And in a moment that honestly broke the internet, the Israeli Foreign Ministry mocked the mission as a condom flotilla, claiming initial inspections of vessels found what appeared to be contraceptives rather than serious humanitarian aid. For context, the flotilla said it was carrying medicines, respiratory equipment, and nutritional supplies for Gaza hospitals. So who's right? Let's talk about the legal question. This is the part most people skip over because it requires more than a 10-second attention span, but it matters. Under international maritime law, international waters, also called the high seas, are exactly that, international. No single country owns them. No single country has automatic jurisdiction over civilian vessels sailing through them. However, and this is the part that makes this legally complicated, under certain interpretations of the law of naval blockades, a country can enforce a blockade in international waters if the blockade has been officially declared, it is being enforced impartially, the enforcement is proportionate. Israel declared its naval blockade of Gaza in 2009. Israel argues this blockade is legal under international law because Gaza is controlled by Hamas, which Israel and the United States designate as a terrorist organization, and because the blockade is designed to prevent weapons smuggling. The flotilla activists argue the opposite, that international law protects humanitarian missions, that unarmed civilians delivering aid cannot be lawfully detained, and that the interception 500 miles from Gaza is disproportionate by any reasonable definition. Turkey's foreign ministry called it an act of piracy. Spain's Prime Minister, Pedro Sanchez, accused Israel of once again violating international law. Israel's allies, including the United States, have largely stayed quiet on this specific incident. Here is the honest answer. International legal experts are genuinely divided on this. That is not me being wishy-washy. That is the actual state of international law on naval blockades. The legal framework is old, it was not designed for this specific situation, and there is legitimate disagreement at the highest levels of international law about what is and isn't permitted here. What is not disputed is this. More than 180 unarmed civilians, including doctors, nurses, journalists, and activists from 44 countries, were detained in international waters at gunpoint, 500 miles from Gaza. Whatever your political position, that fact is notable. Here's context that puts this in perspective. This is not the first time this has happened. It is not even close to the first time. 2010, Israeli commandos raid the Mavi Marmara. 10 activists are killed. Dozens injured. This is the incident that almost ended Israel-Turkey relations for a decade. 2015, the Marianne is intercepted 100 nautical miles from Gaza. 2018, 2 ships, the Al-Ada and Freedom, are seized. Activists report being tasered and beaten. June 2025, the Madeleine is intercepted. Among those detained, Greta Thunberg and European Parliament member Rima Hassan. October 2025, the global Samud flotilla is intercepted. Over 450 activists detained, including the grandson of Nelson Mandela. Multiple activists later allege physical and psychological abuse in Israeli detention. Israel denies the allegations. And now, April 30th, 2026, another interception, another 180-plus activists. This time, Israeli forces travel further than ever before, 500 nautical miles, to stop the boats. That pattern is important because what it tells you is that this is not a one-time overreaction. This is a consistent, deliberate policy. Whether you think that policy is justified or a war crime depends on your framework, but the pattern itself is not in dispute. The escalation is real. And the fact that Israel is now intercepting boats near European waters, near Greece, near Crete, is drawing reactions from European governments that we haven't seen before. Spain's PM, Turkey's foreign minister, UN officials, they are not small voices. Let me ask the harder question now. Even if everything Marie Tota did was legally protected, even if the interception was unlawful, was it wise? This is the part that actually keeps me up at night because it's more complicated than the legal debate. Think about what she was sailing into, not just what she was sailing from. Had her boat made it to shore, what would have happened? I thought about this seriously. Gaza today is not a place where an unarmed Western nurse lands and freely sets up a clinic. The reality of Gaza in 2026 is that any foreign national arriving on an unauthorized vessel would be under the control of whoever is actually running operations on the ground. Movement would be restricted. aid distribution would be managed, and a foreign nurse, especially one who was also a documented activist and a media figure, she becomes a propaganda asset. That is not cynicism. That is what has happened to every Western activist who has reached conflict zones under those conditions in documented historical cases from multiple regions. Now, does that mean she was wrong to try? Does that mean we should dismiss the suffering in Gaza that motivated her? Absolutely not. But here's the thing I want you to sit with. She had energy, passion, and willingness to sacrifice a career for a cause she believed in. That is remarkable. That kind of commitment is rare. What if that energy went toward the homeless veterans being ignored in American and Canadian cities? What if it went toward the addiction crisis killing people in tent cities across North America? What if it went toward the patients dying on wait lists? Those aren't rhetorical jabs. Those are real people suffering in real time right now without trending hashtags and viral videos. Modern activism has a disturbing tendency to migrate toward the most photogenic, most internationally prominent crises, and away from the grinding, unglamorous, unsexy work of fixing things that are broken close to home. That's not an argument against caring about Gaza. It's an argument for caring consistently about everyone, not just the suffering that gets retweets. 2 Canadians are now detained, Marie Tota, a nurse from Ontario, and Umir Tiar, a student from Quebec City. They are being transported to Greece. Global Samud Canada is demanding immediate consular intervention. The Canadian government has so far not responded. Flotilla organizer Ihab Lotayev, who was himself detained in a flotilla in 2011, is calling on the Canadian government to, in his words, have a spine. Here's the basic expectation. Regardless of your position on the Israel-Gaza conflict, regardless of how you feel about the blockade, the flotilla, any of it, Canadian citizens detained by a foreign military in international waters have a right to consular access. That is not controversial. That is basic diplomatic responsibility. The Canadian government needs to respond, confirm the safety of its citizens, and ensure they get home. Look, this story is messy. It's complicated. It has legal dimensions, moral dimensions, political dimensions, and anyone who tells you it's simple is selling you something. What I've tried to do today is give you the actual facts, the actual context, and the actual questions worth asking, instead of just handing you a prepackaged opinion to agree with. Here's what I want you to do. Drop in the comments. Do you think the interception was legal or not? And do you think Marie Tota was brave or reckless, or both? I genuinely want to know what you think. If this video added something to your understanding, like, subscribe, and hit the bell. I make videos for people who want the full picture, not just the headline. I'll see you in the next one.